Oh, it's so wonderful to see you again. Come in and unwind. Welcome back to the Celestial Cafe, a podcast for the magical mind.
So come, take a seat. Would you like something sweet? A star drop potion for the soul? Maybe an enchanted eclair as a treat?
I just baked a batch of warm cookies with a dash of moonlight. I wonder what will happen if you take a little bite.
Here is your bewitching beverage. Let each sip melt your worries away. It's time to open your mind. I wonder what magic awaits us today.
Okay, and hello everybody, and welcome back to the Celestial Cafe podcast, a podcast for the magical mind, where we discuss all things magical and sip some delicious beverages, some tasty treats. I am one of your hosts, Hey Shady Lady, and I have with me the absolutely lovely
It's me. Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
Dixley.
Yay.
So today is a mini episode. So this is an episode where we record a little bit shorter, and it's just two of the hosts instead of all four of us. And we kind of hyper focus on one specific topic. Today's topic is, we're actually going to have to give you all a trigger warning, to be honest. We mentioned this in a couple episodes ago. Me and Dukes just kind of had a little moment where we went off about how meditation is practice for death. And or meditation can be practiced for death. Some of y'all expressed interest in that, so we thought we would follow up with an episode on it. While I was researching this, I realized this is going to be an incredibly heavy topic. I mean, we're really just going to be discussing death and processing it and coming to peace and terms with it. So grief and loss will kind of be a casual point of conversation throughout this. So I just want a trigger warning for those of you who might be going through grief right now, or maybe you're still raw from things in the past, and this might not be the episode for you, and that's totally okay. We will definitely miss you, but we have plenty of other episodes for you to listen to, and we're going to be back next week with the full moon in Virgo episode. We'll be live streaming that Thursday the 2nd at twitch.tv/HeyShadyLady at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that'll be available on podcasting platforms on the 6th of February. Sorry, the 6th of March. It's March. We're going into March. So we'll live stream the 2nd of March, next Thursday. This is Celestial Cafe podcast. You can find us at celestialcafe.org if you want links to our social media, or you would like to support us on Patreon. We're getting little blog posts up for y'all once a week. It's been a lot of fun. But yeah, we just wanted to let y'all know that this episode is going to be a little heavy. But I don't think I don't intend on crying today, so
that's good.
I don't think
I am either. I think I'm doing pretty okay. It's funny. I brought up to several people what kind of episode are you doing this week? I'm like, meditation, prep for death, and I had multiple people be like, oh my god, I could never talk, that's just not something I want to touch,
Really?
and yeah, I mean, it's scary, right?
I'm a little nervous about it, but I don't feel like this is something that anyone will ever be an expert on, or I think anyone can talk about this at any time. This is just part of the human experience.
This is one of the few inevitabilities, of being alive is dying.
I guess I'll give another trigger warning that I find it very likely that I will not cry, but I will probably talk about psychedelics in this episode, because
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Through my psychedelic use, I've had several ego deaths, near death, went to the realm place. And I feel like that's going to be in the area of this liminal space of this kind of thing. So
yeah, whatever this conversation's gonna lead to. So maybe a good place to start is we mentioned this quote multiple times now. Meditation is preparation for death. That was the inspiration for this episode. Where did you hear that quote?
I think I heard it from you, and I think I heard it from that YouTube video, or it's a cartoon, right?
Midnight Gospel, it's by the creators of Adventure Time, animated, I suppose, Pendleton Ward, and the host of the show is someone named
Duncan Trussell.
Thank you. I almost said Trussell Duncan. I was like, Trussell's not a first name.
Trunken Dussel.
Trunken Dussel. And in it, which by the way, everyone, please watch Midnight Gospel, if you are even an inkling of interested in the things we talk about here and want to take it even a step further, that is one psychedelic dude with one psychedelic show.
For
really,
sure.
really, really phenomenal. It's like a podcast in cartoon form with all of its craziness and
the art is so cool. It looks to me like the Kaiba anime that I'm always talking about, but a mixture of Adventure Time. It's a more psychedelic Adventure Time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it's definitely mature. It's not for kids. This is an adult animation. And that was the first time I heard it too. So there was, and in particular, the quote was brought up because Duncan Trussell was having an interview with his mom, who had stage 4 breast cancer and had been told many times, like, you only have 6 months to live, you only have a week to live, you only have a month to live. And she had lived for 4 years past all of those due dates, right? And so they sort of have a back and forth during the episode where he brings up the quote. He's like, I don't know where I heard this, but meditation is preparation for death. And she's like, I totally agree. You know, like it
and
what life is.
Googling that phrase, I don't know if he heard it anywhere, if he just made it up, because I couldn't find it anywhere.
Me neither. I tried to do like a quick Google search. The closest I got was like he had a friend who had a band with the album name.
There's a lot of I found like quite a few different metal bands with songs named that. And it's a very popular meditation, like guided meditation YouTube video. I found lots of YouTube videos that were guided meditations of like you're dying and we're going to visualize your death. And so I don't think it's like an unheard concept, but that turn of phrase specifically, I couldn't really find besides this cartoon.
But I guess it became sort of a brain worm for the two of us because we both piqued interest, and also others. This was a requested episode, by the way, where we had several individuals be like, "Hey, I'm interested in this. Can you expand upon this more?" And I don't know, the way that Duncan Trussell's mom put it was like, you know, life is just things coming and going, right? It is always a movement of energy. And life and death is no different. To be able to weave in and out of, well, usually in and then out, and that's it. But if we're just going to speak with a very physical death, but there's many little deaths that I think we all experience as well through life, and we grieve not only death, but we grieve things like friendships that just weren't meant to be. We grieve moments that have passed by, and I think that, well, with meditation, a big part of it is to stay still, observe what comes towards you, and let it pass you by. At least the form of meditation I'm most familiar with. There's a lot of ways to meditate, right? But yeah, what are your thoughts on all of this?
So it resonated with me immediately because I remember back in my young 20s, so it's been about 10 years since I was really like psychedelic experimenting. And I've had like an experience here or two since then, but it was really in my like early 20s, around the age of 22 to 25, that I was just zooming. And this was also when I had my experiences with astral projection, very intense ones, and out of body experiences and false awakening. My lucid dreaming astral projection experiences were insane, and I think I intentionally closed it all off after that point because there was so much, and it was so because during several of the psychedelics experiences, I experienced ego death and near death. I literally was certain I had died. I completely lost no ego. I was not forget Hey Shady Lady. I wasn't Tiffany. I wasn't any, I was completely dissolved out. And I really like the word dissolved for this because it feels like a dissolution of the ego, but there's still, and this is what meditation teaches you, is you're not the monologue in your head about the to-do list and I'm not even the person that's angry about the person that cut me off in traffic. I'm not the person at all. I'm the consciousness watching the thoughts of the person. And that is what it feels. That's the space that I got to. It was like I like looped out and was like, I remember like one of the moments, which was DMT specifically, and I had like right onto that weird like kaleidoscopic entities in and when I came back down into my body, and it was like all such a sudden experience, because that's just kind of how that one works. But I remember thinking to myself, and because now keep in mind, I was a grungy little punk girl that lived in a punk house where all of us were just like little grunge lords. But I remember the thought that I had to myself was like I had to remember who I was, and was like looking down at my body, and it was just this sudden like, oh, I'm still this dirty little girl. Like that was like the knee jerk, and it was this that was like and then I think the last time I had was ketamine from when I broke my arm, and that was hospital. That was led by doctors, so it was a perfect. And the thought that I had then was like, oh, I'm still this, I can't remember how but it's always like that. I'm still this blank. And then I have an identifier. And this time it was like, I'm still this like annoying Gemini. I can't remember what, but it was Gemini specifically. And I think that's because with the way that I'm engaged with y'all, with Celestial Cafe, and how I present my identity to the world right now, I'm very like, I'm witchy, I'm a Gemini. Like it's very much like a major point of my identity is that. And I guess I'm pushing to the word identity here, where these experiences where I dissolve out of it, I lose that identity to the point where I'm just like a consciousness that doesn't, I don't know, doesn't do
identity,
anything.
Ego.
There's none of that, because that's purely human. That's a maybe it's not just human. I don't know. I can't really know that, but it's definitely a human thing. And when I'm reaching those moments of like dissolution, dissolving, that is gone. All of the identifiers for me, but I'm still here, and it's still me, but it's not laced with the framework and all of the emotions and baggage and pain and all of this stuff that it is in the human form. But it's still, it's weird, because I know that it's me when I'm out in that little like consciousness space, as compared to when I'm here. And it's not even, and this is the thing, it's not something I can control, but I think that it is something that you could control if you became very like practiced and skilled at meditation. I think this is something that's the point of meditation, is to be able to intentionally disconnect from ego and be the consciousness that is observing it all. And so when I first started understanding what meditation was, and to link this back to the near-death experiences and stuff, I remember like thinking that like enlightenment, when I was really getting into new age stuff, and I was like, I think the point is not wanting to be human anymore and releasing from this existence and moving on to a different existence. And then that's terrifying as an ego, because what about my family? What about this? What about all this? What about my dreams? And what about the things that I want to do? And I was listening to someone on YouTube last night called Daji, and Daaji, and he runs a YouTube channel called Heartfulness. And I'm not sure if he has a specific title. I didn't watch enough of his videos to understand his backstory, but he had a video called "Can Meditation Kill You?" And he basically said like, meditation is like dissolving away, and it can feel scary towards the last moments, because the ego kicks in and says, what about my family? What about my body? What about this? And so you asked me what my thoughts were. They're disconnected. They're all of this stuff kind of ties into one thing.
I know this is a big topic. When we talk about death, we have to talk about life, and vice versa, which is just chaos. And something you said brought me back to something that I kind of held true when I was first studying Buddhism, which is life is suffering, you know. It is. And I think a part of us living is not necessarily to, reduce the suffering where and when you can, but I also think riding through the suffering, because it's inevitable. Something I talk about a lot is that there's a few inevitabilities in life, death being one of them, grief, sadness, hurt, pain. Also joy is a birthright, freedom, and stuff like that. You mentioned how you are on this precipice sometimes in meditation where all of a sudden you see this wide open space and then you can't help but turn around and think about what you're leaving behind if you choose to take this deep meditative route. And I try to assert this quite often, which is ego is never necessarily a bad thing. Like I think it shapes our identities. Right? Like ego is identity, right? But like, and I think that identity is cool and very hip and fun. But I think that identity also keeps us tethered to maybe things that can be prevented, like pain, like specific pains, like specific hurts, right? And it's sort of that balancing beam between like which suffering do I hold and keep close and use to heal me, and what suffering is not worth it, and where can I soothe and heal from those suffering. And I think that death is one of those things where you can't run from it, right? In any way, shape, or form.
I want to interrupt just to say, watch the Puss in Boots movie. You haven't seen it yet, have you?
No, I haven't.
That's all I'll say then.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah,
they talk deep about stuff like that.
Yes. I don't want to spoil. I'm not going to say anything. No. Yes, it is a major theme of the movie.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, he's that's part of the trailer. I haven't
seen the trailer.
Oh, well, then I can at least say this because he's a cat with 9 lives and he's on his last life. And all of a sudden, he's afraid.
Well, I really resonate with that, honestly, because I guess lore, right? It's not something I talk about a lot, but when I was suicidal, I attempted 7 times. And I joke that I have 2 lives left constantly. Wow. It's like this is all I got left. So I got one more lucky break and that's it. And it's something that I think about a lot, right? Because and I think that at some point too, like we're both going to agree that like it's something that's almost impossible to quantify. We'll never know some things about this discussion.
You can't be an expert on this. And I also think that it's a lot of subjective, like this is a very subjective thing. Because when I was kind of preparing for this podcast, I came to the realization that every culture and every human has a different relationship with death and the afterlife, and whether there is one or not. And I certainly have my own very strongly held beliefs on this, but I can't say what's real. And this is why I always fall to like a gentle agnosticism. I don't know what's going to happen or what can happen. I have very strong thoughts and hypotheses and speculations, and but we can't possibly know, and that's why I think that there's no way to be an expert on the topic. But what I do think is interesting is while I was researching this, I kind of stumbled in a rabbit hole about the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I think it's also called the Bardo Thordol, but it's something that I think we've all heard of, kind of in like, oh, the Book of the Dead. Like I think we all know about it, but we don't know much about it. And it's Buddhism, right? So it's a Tibetan text, and it's guidance on how to navigate the process of dying and navigating through the afterlife. And while I was reading this, like Tibetan monks will gather around people as they die, and I guess maybe other monks. I'm not totally sure on this, but they will read this book aloud to people as they're like nearing death. So this is obviously like people who are older aged and not sudden deaths, right? People where death is, we know death is coming, and they will read the book aloud that will guide the person. And I think that the specific phrase I saw was like help them to understand and decipher the hallucinations during the death process. And I thought that was super interesting because psychedelics induce hallucinations, and DMT is released supposedly when we're born and when we die, and people use DMT as a psychedelic drug, and that is so these kaleidoscopic things that I was taught, like that is what I feel. I feel like that. So I feel, I say a lot that I'm certain that I'm going to, when I die, I'm going back to that space that I was in those psychedelics, or like when I went into liquid Legoland, as I called it, from the hospital ketamine situation. So it's, I would love to read the Tibetan Book of the Dead so I can get a little guidance, because that shit was crazy. And it is scary, but I think the main reason that it's scary is because, this brings me to the word control, which has been big on my mind. I kept drawing the Wheel of Fortune reversed earlier with the tarot stream, and it's a loss of control and a release. And I also wanted to mention Stoicism, and you mentioned something a second ago about accepting the inevitability of death. And that's a huge principle of the practice of Stoicism, which I'm not very familiar with, but it came up in my studies over the last couple of days too. And I think it's like, this is inevitable. This is going to happen. And this also, I got so many excited, but memento mori, which remember one day that you will die. And this is also something that I find myself saying all the time, except I memify it a little bit. But I remember I had a tweet from forever ago that was just like, I'm really pissed off because I still have to die one day. Like, I still have to experience death. Like, and every now and again, that thought will strike me. I'll just be like going to get in my car at the gas station, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I still have to die. I still haven't died
I'm here
yet.
Getting gas.
And it's really hard to continue, because that can cause like an existential crisis. And
that's why people go crazy about this type of stuff, right? Like thinking about this type of stuff. And another like back and forth I had today with my partner about this subject was like, how did he put it? It was like, because he's a very introspective individual, just naturally very willing to sit down and be quiet and let the thoughts sort of come to him and him kind of reflect from there. And he's like, I don't understand why, I guess, like deep inner worlds, like why some people just don't go there. I'm like, they're afraid, because when you're in that quiet space, when you're in this silence, when it's just you're in yourself, hanging out with you, there's no distractions. There's no, nothing can take you away from that other than yourself, which is why a lot of people then get off of the meditation cushion angry, frustrated, irritable, sad, crying, which I think is natural. And I guess this is a good time to say too, like the to meditate, right, is, I believe there's a difference between meditative activities and meditation. And like I do believe people can achieve meditative states through things like painting and just like walking, like anything really. But I think
playing Stardew Valley.
It's playing sure. if you are fully grounded, fully mindful, fully well, hold on now. fully in your power and fully engaged. It's kind of interesting because I think that meditation sort of is such a balancing beam between like being fully active. To me, after I meditate, I feel exhausted. Like in some ways, I feel energized and exhausted because I just spent so long sort of being witness to what was being thrown at me.
Well, God, time drags when you're meditating.
For sure. Especially if you're new to it. It's
because you had told me when we were prepping for this episode that I should meditate. Yes. And I just kind of laughed at you when you said it. You were like, have you meditated? When's the last time you meditated? And I was just like, haha, that's a funny joke. So I did try to meditate last night while I was falling asleep. And I guess, to be fair, I do practice meditation in that way every now and again, whenever I'm trying to like fall into lucid dreams or have like a guided meditation before bed. I do frequently listen to guided meditations before bed. But it's often background noise while my mind is still just making to-do lists for the next day. And I just like having a voice to fall asleep to. But I tried last night and I fell asleep at some point, but it was a constant fight with myself to not go into analysis to-do list mode. It was like, and I was trying really hard to be like, watch the clouds pass by. Oh, there's another to-do list. But then I was watching myself watch myself.
Right. There's layers, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, who's watching the watcher that's watching the watcher?
Right, exactly. And no, and I totally resonate with that. And I think that, a lot of people fear jumping into meditation because what is there left when it's just you and the silence, other than yourself? And there's nothing to numb it. There's nothing to escape from it in those moments. And in a perfect world, in a perfect meditation section, you'd be able to greet the thought and have it pass you by, acknowledging it, being like, wow, my phrase is always, it's very curious how that thought popped up, how this feeling occurred when this thought, the tandem that they created, how curious that is. And then I let it pass by. But I think that when it comes to identity and ego, we are, the word I use a lot is tethered. I think that we tether ourselves down to our beliefs, our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences. And I think that when we then take it a step further and we talk about meditation being preparation for death, I think that it's all about letting go and letting life do its life thing, And I think that we all try to rationalize so much of what happens to us and pontificate upon, if only I did this different, then this outcome would have happened differently, and then I would be happier, or things would be different. And I even see in grief, right? People being like, oh, if only I answered that call. Oh, if only I had spent more time with them. But I think a part of honoring life itself is allowing those ebbs and flows to happen organically, and not to be influenced by external measures, right? And I think that when we use meditation to prepare for death, we can more easily allow life's natural flow to flow, and not judged by our own experiences with it, not giving it labels or terms or verbiage that sometimes life just is life, and this is just another puzzle piece to it. And I think that meditation is really good at because meditation in theory, we're meant to just be, and I guess I'll take this moment to say, like, a very common misconception of meditation is that we don't think. We want to be in complete silence, right? And we don't want anything. That's not true. I in my opinion, I think that the point of meditation is to allow the thoughts to come, but to not hold on to them. Yeah. Right. And this isn't to say,
I think it's like to watch in non-attachment. I think that's the main. So like we're saying, meditation is practice for death, but that's not the main function, the only function, the primary. Like meditation, I think, is just a lot of like coming to terms with yourself. I think it helps to reduce fear and anxiety over a lot of things, specifically anxiety. Releasing a lot of difficult emotions and untangling your mind, untangling yourself, and learning what matters and what doesn't matter. So when you're sitting here on your 20th internal monologue, replaying the argument you got in with that person over and over and over, and then suddenly you become a little lucid in your waking life, you wake up a little bit and you're like, oh, this is the 4th time today I'm like rehashing this fight and scripting a new argument in my head. Like, and then that's where shadow work would start to come in. Why am I still ruminating on this? Well, because it's unfinished business. The baggage is open. Why can't I release this? Well, I'm really stubborn and angry at them for doing this, and I don't want to forgive. You're
tethered.
Yes, you can start to untangle it and work through it. And eventually the goal, I would think, is you're not ruminating on that fight, and you're not scripting new or whatever it is, like me with my constant to-do lists. Like maybe instead of when I'm in bed trying to fall asleep, I shouldn't be scripting my to-do lists out. I should have a moment at my desk.
Yes, a mindful, chosen, aware moment.
Where I sit and I pull out my notebook and I write my to-do list. I dump it all out of my brain. And then when I get in bed, and I've definitely practiced this in the past, and when I've had those moments, when I get into bed and my mind starts to go into autopilot of like, tomorrow I need to wake up at 4, do the laundry, then I can say to myself gently, we already wrote this down. We don't need to do this right now. Yeah. We already have this all ready to go tomorrow. There's nothing more there. It's already taken care of. And I think that's a nice, gentle way of like relieving myself of that. It's already taken care of. It's okay. Yeah. We don't have to think about this right now. And it's okay that you are thinking about it too. You don't want to punish yourself for having the thoughts.
No. And that's an important thing too, because I think that's what leads a lot of people into frustration with meditation, which is that they are then greeted with all these shadows, right? That pop up inevitably because you're shedding a lot of light in a lot of places when you meditate, just by simply being present and being aware and being there. And then all these ugly, yucky thoughts start popping up. And instead of being neutral and staying curious and interested, you become tethered to the thoughts.
And judgmental.
And you start to berate. I can't believe I'm still worried about this. Like, what's wrong with me? I can't believe that this is still on my mind after 6 years. Like those types of mindsets,
me?
Right?
My relationships. Hold up. Literally me though. Cause it's like, so there is a judgment that comes along with it, but sometimes it is like, why the hell am I still hung up on this?
Right.
Time is ticking. We ain't got time to think about this anymore. What the heck is wrong with you? And then that, like, even that sentence, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm nothing. Like, and then maybe there is something to unpack there.
Another phrase that comes to my mind when I think of meditating is freeing yourself. I feel very free after I meditate. I feel like I eliminate and I relieve myself of these internal monologues that are not mine. And that's a thing too. Like, oftentimes when we have thoughts like, what's wrong with me? That's not us speaking. That's our identity speaking. That's what we feel like we should be saying. That's what we feel like we should be reacting to, right? But there are no shoulds in life. We are simply here to bear witness to what it is to be human, and all of the chaos and all of the fun things that involves, including identity, including ego, including just all layers of life. And we're meant to be free. We're meant to be light-footed, lighthearted. And I think that meditation lightens us up and keeps us enlightened, in fact, within life and within ourselves. And I think death is heavy, right?
For sure.
Death is really, really heavy.
I think it's heavy for us to process as tethered egos. Yeah. But I think that death itself is so weightless. Yes, I think that, and I was watching quite a few YouTube videos last night, but I did find in the search of this subject, it was mostly Tibetan monks I was coming across that were talking about this.
Yeah, it's when for those who are listening, like if you want to learn more about like the connection of death and life, it's usually Tibetan. They are all about that. They love to pontificate upon what death means in life. It's
and I think like coming to like a peaceful moment of it, that it is just a part of the bigger whole. And it's not, I don't want to say that it's not scary, but it doesn't have to be scary. And it can be. Like there was one meditation that I was watching where she was she was a monk, and she was doing a guided meditation of visualizing your death, and like imagine that you're in the bed that you want to be at the age you want to be, and comfortable, and then she was going through all this, like all of your belongings are already taken care of, and all of the charities that you want to support after you're gone, beautiful. Or like it was this whole thing of like it's comfortable, and all of your loved ones you've already spoken and said everything you need to. And then I stopped listening there because I started to realize that it was like existentially dangerous for me to get too deep into an actual death meditation. And I think that's important for some of us to know our boundaries with those things. And I struggle a lot with like derealization and things like that. So I have to be very careful with like too much lucid dreaming stuff and too much of this, because it will make me not want to take showers and go to work, because what's the point? I get too existential, I get too airy, I get too floated away.
Right.
But listening to her, someone had replied in the comments, and they weren't necessarily like upset or anything, but there was some kind of comment that was basically like, well, this is just one type of death and not every death is painless and blah. And they were going off on like this is only like if in your fantasy where there's no pain involved. And it's like, we touched on this a bit, but I don't know, like there is, I think that the release of the pain though is part of the process as well. And I think that taking some of the like metaphorical ideas of like meditation as practice for death and applying it, it's a moment and then it's over. And then you're on to the next moment. And I think that if you can bring that into your daily life of like, it's like, even with like breaking my arm and sitting in the park with my broken arm in my lap, and no, it wasn't in my lap yet, it was next to me, and realizing that I needed to get it into my lap, which meant I need to pick up my broken arm, and understanding that I was going to have to spatula and move it, and prepping myself for the experience of that pain, but knowing that it had to be done, and doing that. And then it's over, and then it's in my lap and we're good. And now the exhale, the relief, and it's safer here. Right. And I think that we see that a lot in movies with like, oh, action movie, my shoulder's dislocated, I'm ready, 3, 2, 1. And then it's over. And then they're just like, all right, let's go back to running away from the bad guy. Like the moment is just like snap it and then move back into place and move on. And I think that can be applied to like a lot of like heartbreak, and but there's some pain that lingers. So and that's a good point too, because of grief, and this is where the phrase "your feelings are valid" come in. Your feelings are real, and it's I mean, what I was thinking of the whole time is the art of the funeral. You go, you grieve, like with all your loved ones. You take time off of work. You take personal time to process it, but then you have to go back to work. You have to go back to that grind. You have to go back to life goes on. And I think that meditation allows us in a perfect state of meditation. It teaches us to allow that flow to happen organically, not be numb to it, not be like, I'm going to be so strong and not show any emotions because that's ego. And no, it's not that. It's because feelings are real. That's a part of the human experience, is to feel. And we definitely don't, but we don't want to be controlled by our emotions. We want to, instead we want to be like almost working alongside our emotions, right? Rather than feeling out of control with them. But anyway, I think that life does go on, right? We don't have a choice. And I think that when we allow life to life, and we don't get married to so many ideals and concepts and mindsets and identities and ego, and once again, acknowledging that they exist, acknowledging their importance, but not marrying them. That's what meditation does best. It's the art of allowing things to flow and move forward and ebb as they are, and for you to simply bear witness, to surrender. Surrender is a really good word here. Yeah. And I like bearing witness too, because that feels like, with the psychedelic talk I was talking about, the meditation, the out of body, bearing witness to it, and becoming less attached and not holding as strong of an identity to the things that happen to you. You are not your experiences, right?
You are not your broken arm.
I'm not my broken arm, right? But there's a lot of lessons that I've taken with me from that. And the pain is definitely still lingering. I'm very ginger and have to be very careful with it. The pain is definitely still there. But that's, scars too. Like the wound heals and you're left with a scar as a reminder, right? You remember that it was there.
And I mean, even in death, no one expects someone who is grieving to get over it. you know, like that
No. And I
pain
think
is still there.
some
always.
people say that and act like that, and that's asshole behavior. But
Yeah.
but the a compassionate human being understands that grief is not okay. I went to the funeral and now it's over. You know,
Right. Right.
It's something that has to be integrated and processed and digested. I think emotions are things that we digest, and we either digest them well or we don't,
or it digests us.
Yeah. Actually, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
But pulling back to meditation in regards to death a little bit, I want to touch on this like idea that, you know, these stories and movies and stuff where we see someone who's dead and they're like ghostly hovering over their body, and they're like, and then there's like maybe an angel or usually the Grim Reaper that's there with them and is like, oh yeah, you died. And then the ghost is like, I died. Well, I wasted my life. I didn't do anything good. I just worked all the time and I didn't do anything that I actually wanted to do. There's this stereotype, and I think for a reason. We get so caught up in the hustle and humdrum of the busy world that we live in that we don't live how we want to. We live how we have to, and I think that's painful sounding to me. That is more painful than the release of death because you get to the end of it and I wish I had told that person I liked them, you know, which is a very like teenager kind of thing to have. Or I wish that I hadn't wasted 20 years in this dead end job. Or I wish I had, you know, gotten the divorce that I should have gotten and actually sought out real love instead of just staying stuck in settling in these things. And I think that by practicing meditation, and especially in regards to some of these where it's like imagining like you're at your funeral watching, you know, like it's a Yu Yu Hakusho moment. You're watching everyone grieve your death. How would you have wished that you lived your life, and what do you wish that people will say about you at your funeral, and how can you live in such a way that people will feel like that about you? And if we are preparing for an event that is 100% going to happen, it is an inevitability. And this brings back to Stoicism too, where we become comfortable and accepting of inevitabilities to the point where we don't fear them, and that doesn't consume and control our life anymore. But this can help you shift your focus to what is actually important to you while you're still alive. So you're not the hovering ghost that's regretting. Right?
That's very true. I like this term because meditation prepares you for death, which prepares you for life, right? Like it's all together, right? Because what I can say for myself and my meditation journey is that meditation has made me more present. Meditation has made me more eager to be an active participant in my life, rather than just sort of letting life hit me. There's a back and forth, I think. I think that, and I mentioned a lot already, like kind of just succumbing to like life's flow, right? But I think there is like some things that can be controlled and some capacity that just leads to greater joys. And I since meditating, which I've been meditating pretty regularly since, let me look at the year. It's been about 12 years of like semi-regular meditating. Wow. And it's brought a lot of joy to me, because it has directly taught me, once again, and I like the phrase life goes on, right? And I can't just sit in my thoughts all day. It's kind of interesting thinking about it because like every time, and I call it sitting down at the mat because I yoga and meditation's very together for me.
Very much. Yeah.
And I would love to also do an episode on yoga and we
could probably do a lot of episodes on yoga.
I love yoga.
Interesting that you brought that up because when I was the first thing I was coming across when I was researching this was specifically yoga nidra, which is the like laying down, sleeping, like type of yoga, not necessarily sleeping, but the very relaxed laying down. And that's very like I mean, that's kind of that's the pose you take. You're when you're dead,
the
like your
corpse pose. It's literally called corpse pose in yoga. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that was being brought up a lot, and I was like, yoga is probably a whole other rabbit hole. Let me focus on the philosophy. We'll do yoga another time.
Sure. Yeah. Like it's for me, it's very entwined. Like
yoga's interesting though, because the whole point of yoga is like try to move, and then you notice a pain and you become present with the pain and you integrate and accept it, and then breathe into it, and it makes you more mindful of how your body moves.
Oh, and that's a good point too. Thank you for bringing up the breath, because I think that's such an important part of meditation too. Is something that I've been saying for a long time is, at the end of the day, all I got is me and my breath. That's it. That's all I can rely on. That's all I can depend upon, right? Everything can disappear at a moment's notice for one reason or another. And so I think that a part of the reason why breath work is so talked about in meditation, I mean, you'll see it anywhere, in through the nose, out through the mouth, right? That kind of like as one of the like cornerstones of
meditating. What about a stuffy
meditating.
nose allergy having assholes? I got to in through the mouth, out through the mouth.
Valid. But you'll be doing it wrong, according to some people. You're meditating wrong, which is actually a whole other conversation too, that mindset of you're meditating wrong, which is right.
You got to do the alpha breathing.
Oh no. No, that's cursed. But that is helpful though. Like for getting energy up, I would, oh man, doing that for meditating, I'd be like wired.
There's some crazy processes I've seen, but like the activating the energy vortex of the stomach, and then the way that would increase blood flow, and like the actual, so like I'm poking fun at that alpha breathing, like, get up and hustle every day, bro culture. But like, it's definitely a valid practice too.
Yeah. Invest in crypto while dragon's breath. Yeah. Like,
the dragon's breath crypto.
Wim Hof and
dragon's breath is, I was watching some like cute little yoga girls do it, and I was like, oh, but it's so fun though, because it's like the whole point is to kind of be silly and ugly and just kind of exist in that moment.
Just human. Right?
Yeah.
And it's funny that like breath is such an important part of meditation, because when you die, you don't breathe.
The breath stops.
The breath ends. And I think that sort of having that as, and that to me, the breath is the anchor to life. And that's the way I always view it. As long as I got my breath, I'm living. Right. Well, as long as I can breathe.
There's kind of I don't know, a spiritual belief that life begins when and this breath is a whole conversation here, but when the first breath is taken by the baby is when the soul into the body, like, and that's not everybody's spiritual belief. And there's a whole can of worms with that kind of dialogue there. But
I mean, but that's how astrology works too, right? We don't do the astrological chart for the time they were conceived. It was the time we
take our first breath, and that's when our rising sign is, and that's where that's the time of birth. And I find that really interesting, because the breath is so interwoven with all of it. And then like thinking, to me, like even taking this concept a little bit further, the last exhale and the soul leaves the body and it moves on to a new wherever it's gonna go. And but then the breath is gonna move into something else. And it's interesting too, when I was in psychedelic states, that one of the first thing when you start, like when the visuals come on of things, the first thing, and I'll say it forever, Midsummer nailed it. Midsummer nailed a psychedelic representation in media. I don't often go like, oh shit, that's it. But Midsummer nailed it. It's a horror movie, so be careful. But the first thing you notice, at least for me and a lot of people that I talk to about this kind of thing, is whether you're inside or outside or wherever, it's like, oh my God, my bed is breathing. The trees are breathing.
Yeah, in my experience too. Yes.
Like, and
I agree with that.
Everything has breath around us. There's breath everywhere.
Yes, I agree with that. And that pulsing, right? That the breath, the ebbing and flowing. We look at the moon. We just talked about the moon. The moon is breathing. Inhale, exhale.
Oh,
right?
I did. Right.
Like and I feel like breathing is life. And I think that us connecting to the breath, which once again, whole new conversation, right? But worth talking about with pranayama and us activating the breath, which activates specific parts of our body and mostly our brain, right? And if we're going to even go there, the brain is us and the body's a vehicle. Right. If we want to go there. And so when we breathe, we are actively healing and nourishing and feeding our life force, our prana. Right. And I think that in a roundabout way, that's also preparation for death itself by living and nourishing the life we have right now to its fullest, whatever that means, on every level.
Because into like spiritual, like certain spiritual beliefs, but like what we're doing in this life is preparing us for the next one, and on and on and on. That's on the line of reincarnation, but astrology with the North and South Node teaches that.
Right. Yeah. And I figured we'd also end up going to a place of like reincarnation and like, where does the soul go? And I think that's worth thinking about too. But I think most of all, like when it comes to just like meditating, showing up for the practice, which when I was talking about my partner earlier, I called it an exercise. You have to, it's a your bicep curl. You get better at it the more you show up and do it. It's something that can be skillfully improved upon. I definitely don't meditate the same as I did 10 years ago. And for lack of a better term, I'm better at it now, where I can.
Now you're built differently.
Yeah, now I'm built differently, and so jot that down. And I think that the way that I think the core of the statement and the mindset of meditation, prepping for death, the way I mostly see it is like life is just comings and goings over and over and over again. And in all ways, shapes, and forms, in ourselves and others and our loved ones and enemies even, we're all just having these deep inner worlds that nothing is stagnant or should be. Well, I don't want to say that necessarily either, but like nothing stays still for too long. And I think that meditation has taught me that anything can happen at the drop of the hat, and my feelings are real when they do occur. But meditation has allowed me to sort of be flexible in life, allow me to show up more presently in life, so that when the time for death comes, not that it matters because I'll be dead, but when the time for death comes, I will have lived a present life, a mindful and a guided life that I can sit back and be pleased with. And I also think at the same time that meditation has prepped me for the deaths of those around me. And I think it's something that I think is important to note about myself in this conversation is that I'm 28, turning 29 this year. I've been very lucky, and I've not had too many major deaths in my life that surround me. I feel very gracious for that. However, I'm entering my Saturn return, so anything's possible now. And I'm feeling. I mean, it's hard to quantify how prepared you are, right, for something. I don't think that. I
think it's different every time it happens.
That's true.
I'm similar. I've had like my. I was not close enough with my grandparents. I was too young when they passed. But my close people close to me, I had one high school friend who died, but that was strange, but it was like 2 or 3 years after high school, and we were already disconnected from each other. So it wasn't as shocking to me, I think, as if I had still been hanging out with them all the time. And then for me, it's mostly been like my soulmate pets that have rocked my world. But the older I get, the more inevitable, the word again, it is that I'm going to have to face this sooner than later. And I don't mean it for myself maybe, but I mean in the ones that I care about around me. And I'm at a point now in my life where I turned 35 this year. And I'm at a point now in my life where I keep having these like nihilistic, jaded thoughts of like, oh, it's all downhill from here. Now I'm just going to get diseases and die. Like everything just falls apart. My body starts to hurt and I just get old and ugly and die. Like, really jaded mindset, but that's just me. But I think that now the mental preparation is coming in. And in some ways it's like I look back at like the really terrific is the word I wanted to use, and that's strange, but terrible, interesting that those words share that sound. And like my cat from a couple of years ago, that was my little best friend, and how much that I can visibly and viscerally remember the wailing sobs of myself holding his little body on the way to the vet, hoping they could resuscitate him, and then I think about where I am now. I think about how long I cried about that for like months and how easy it was for me to slip back into that emotional state. I think about my first terrible breakup in 2016 and how that same raw wailing animal I turn into in those moments. And I think that she's waiting inside of me to burst out whenever this grief, these things are taken from me without warning, and without any way to really prepare for it. And what I can do in those moments is wail and cry like the Duncan Trussell. Y'all should watch that if you haven't seen it. The Midnight Gospel.
We'll post it in the Discord. It is required watching for this conversation, I think.
I can release that and experience it in the moment, and know, as I said earlier, it's the pain will not be there forever. It might linger, and it's something you can tap into. But
you can choose to grieve whenever you want.
But it will heal and fade. And then I think that, I don't know, like
respect that flow.
I feel
that
like
up and that down.
The more that I go through it, the more the easier it gets, is what I feel like. And I don't know if easier is really the right word, but it feels more integrated, and it feels more like I'm more at peace now. And it's not even so much like on a spiritual, like, well, he's in a better place. It's not so much in that regards as it is like, there's this feeling of like, he's not suffering anymore, kind of thing. There's this feeling of like, the peace and the release, but there is the wonder of like, where did he go? Where did he come from? Where did he go? But meaning whoever, like, and I brought up a breakup specifically because I don't think these feelings are unique to death.
Like I said, we experience a lot of little deaths throughout our lives, I think, and in many different forms rather than the physical death, right? There's deaths of friendships, there's deaths of relationships, there's deaths of mindsets, of habits, of thoughts, right? And
lifestyles.
And you said the word earlier, raw, which I think is just like a really apt word for all of this, because when I think of raw, I just think of the raw human experience, right? And I think that meditations just allows us to be human. And yes, these feelings that I'm feeling are real. These thoughts that I'm thinking are thoughts indeed. But instead of tethering myself to these thoughts and these feelings and these experiences and these things that are outside of me, that are not internalized, right? Then the sooner I can release my attachment to these things, the more easily I can become flexible through life.
And I think that's why it feels like it's become easier, quote unquote, for me, is because I release the attachment to it. And I guess like the breakup that I went through was the first major lesson in that. And like, maybe that's why it still haunts me too, is because it's like, I don't know, maybe I release other things quicker because that one has been so painful for so long, in a way that doesn't, it doesn't make rational sense to me. It's like a logical creature, but an emotional creature, that bitch has got some grubby hands that won't let go. And that's the thing, is I think that we don't know until we experience it, how we're going to react and how we're going to handle it. And all we can do while we're handling it is give grace to ourselves, and breathe through it and let it pass, let it go, because I think that a lot of it is too just like and it's not, I don't think this is something we consciously think about, but I think this might have to do with it. I think Dukes, you were one of the first people that ever asked me this, and it was in regards to this relationship that's been really hard for me to let go of. And I think that you asked me something along the lines of like, why can't you like let it go, or why don't you let it go, or have you let something to the point where I literally was like, my response to you was like, I don't want to let it go. Like, I don't want to lose it. I don't want it to be gone. Like, and because even in the pain of it, I still have it. You know what I mean?
Right. And sometimes I think that this is my belief, that when these sorts of things happen, it thickens our story. And I think that there's like almost like an air of like, forgive, don't forget sort of thing, right? Where you don't want to let go because you don't want the same thing to happen again. It's a protection. It's defensive, right? Yeah. It protects. I think that if we're going to be talking about flow, which is what I think life is meant to be, I think that sometimes these not being able to let go, once again, tethers us, keeps us still, keeps us anchored, in a way where we want to move forward and move on, but we're still
at a certain point, it becomes a comfort zone. Because
Absolutely.
You understand it. It's safe space. You know how to exist in that space. It's predictable.
That's what I think. Exactly. Like predictable. That's a great word. I'm thinking, I use the term a lot here, NPC. I shit on that mind, like the NPCs that are out there. But in reality, what's happening is that these people are so complacent and so okay with the life that they've made, and they're so unbothered by the way life has been paved for them that they're not willing to challenge anything.
They're choosing to be NPCs. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that's kind of why I shit on them sometimes, because it's not like, and of course, once again, as always, capitalism and stuff, it has its grubby little hands on stuff like this and mindsets like this. But I think ultimately too, it's just like, it's hard to be an active participant in life. It's painful, but life is also suffering. So it's like, are you going to be involved with the suffering for the greater good? Like, this is a light in the shadow sort of moment, right? Or are you going to just be comfortable and drift and not really be attached to, like, it's funny because like I'm speaking as if like being detached is a bad thing, which is sort of the point of meditation, is to detach. But I think mostly detaching from like,
I think it's detaching from the stubbornness of like holding on to stuff. Yeah. I don't think that it's detaching as in not being involved or present. It's detaching from things that are weighing you down and not allowing you to be present.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. I got confused in my own head for a second. There's so much attaching, there's so much detaching happening. I don't know what's going on anymore. And for those who are listening and who have never meditated and who haven't tried in a long time, I recommend it. It's always a good practice to sort of have in your system. There's lots of different forms of meditation. The one that we're talking about mostly is, I think, mindfulness.
Yes.
Meditation, just being present, and being aware and acknowledging what passes by you and being like, indeed, that is what I'm thinking and feeling. How interesting, how curious, and letting it sort of pass by. And instead of being like, wait, oh my God, I do feel heartbreak right now. Like, I'm gonna hold on to this for a little bit. Right.
Ruminate on
it. Human. Yeah, it's human. So, and that's another thing too. Like, you can't beat yourself up about it. It's human. That's what we've been taught.
It's just time to relive that chapter, and you just want to wallow in it for a second.
Yeah. And as long as you do that mindfully.
It's entertaining sometimes.
Sometimes for those who like to play.
I gotta live this little mini drama back in my head real quick.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the joy of being human, right? Being able to have the freedom to play with these things. Yeah. But I think that overall, with the scope of what we've been discussing, like, the freer the better, the looser the better, because the more tightly wound we are with mindsets and beliefs and labels and feelings and thoughts, like the less we are able to simply absorb and surrender to life itself, which includes all of it, all of the pain, all of the joy, all of the paradise and all of the hell, all at the same time. And we need more present people to be here with us, I think. It
For sure. Look at this shit. Can we pay attention? What's going on out here?
This brings us all closer together. The more that we can accept the fact that we're all human, living the human experience in all of its dimensions, including the inevitables like death and not living in fear of those things, the more that we can all be free together, right? And live without anything that holds us back and anything that keeps us attached to old mindsets and beliefs. We're meant to be expanding, growing, not staying still.
I think that we could probably talk about this for like hours. We're pushing on our hour though, so we should wrap it up here. I really loved this conversation.
Me too. This was really pleasant. Thank you for having this with me.
I know. Thank you. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope that y'all enjoyed and found some kind of peace or something from what we talked about. Well, I'll definitely try to link some of the sources that we talked about in the blog, the podcast notes, the show notes on the website at celestialcafe.org. And they'll be in the YouTube description as well. And we'd love to have you all in the Discord to hang out and chit chat. We'll be posting the Duncan Trussell clip there, and it'll also be in the descriptions and stuff too. But maybe we can have a conversation about this. If y'all have any questions or follow-ups you'd like to see from us or things like that, then let us know. We're going to be meeting up tonight to flesh out our schedule for March. So we'll be back next week to let y'all know what the March lineup is going to look like. But for now, definitely next Thursday, the 2nd of March at 7 p.m. Eastern, we will be live on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/HeyShadyLady, live streaming the recording process of our full moon in Virgo coverage. And that will be live on podcasting platforms on the 6th of March, Monday. And I guess that's about it, Dukesley. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, likewise.
Thank you for such a cool, deep, existential conversation.
Yeah. I think that this is just important to talk about. It's
not talked about very often in casual environments. And it's understandable because there's a lot of people that might have wounds that will be pried open by this, and they're not ready to disassemble and compartmentalize and process and release those things.
Yeah, and that's valid and that's real. This is one of the hardest things I think that anyone can sit down and process.
But
it feels so unfair.
The more casual conversations that are had about things like these topics, the more people can process them through it or learn how to process it, because these are things that aren't taught in school. You know what I mean? And these are things that we either learn from media, meaning like movies and stuff or TV shows, or it feels like we don't really get a chance to learn it all unless it's within our like familial circles and like close-knit circles.
True.
So I think seeing like that's why I find such power in our podcast in the first place, is we're getting to air things that are usually talked about in private spaces.
Circles, right? But it's important to talk about this stuff. We're all
it
in this
normalizes
together.
A lot of it too. So it helps like normalize like a way of approaching things that might not often be talked about, I guess.
That may be unconventional, or maybe even seen. We talk about stoicism, which is often seen as very cold way of living.
It's interesting that came up in this, but I do feel like I didn't deep dive into it. I know I saw it like Marcus Aurelius was like the daddy of it, and it's from like the Roman Empire, and I kind of like I skimmed the surface. The reason it was coming up is because he had a book called Meditations where he was really like circling around the topic of death. And so that was very much coming up in what I was researching was his take on the inevitability of death, and that you just need to come to peace with it so that you can live a better, it's not even a better life, but a more authentic life.
Exactly.
And I thought it was
agree with that.
relevant to how we were going about or how my research was shaping up anyway.
Right,
so
yeah.
Okay, but I'm gonna wrap and see. We can just keep going. But thank you all so much for listening, and I guess we'll catch you in the next episode. And I hope y'all have a good weekend or start of your week. All right, bye everybody.
Bye. Happy Pisces season.
Happy Pisces time. What a perfect conversation for Pisces.
I was gonna say, I feel like this lines up.